Hello, everyone. Let's see, it looks like Facebook is still pulling up. There we go. Hi, everyone. So glad to be here again. It's been a couple weeks, maybe 3. I took a bit of a hiatus from doing the Facebook Lives. There were multiple reasons. My schedule changed, our um, nanny childcare situation changed. So there were a number of reasons, but I feel really good being back here and am really excited for what I'm going to talk about today. But first, I want to thank everyone who commented on my post in my private Facebook group, Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. Last week, I posted on there. It was just fully transparent and saying, like, I don't know if I'm going to keep this going or not. Like, what it was feeling like. And let me know, like, comment if you can resonate with this, where sometimes social media can feel like you're shouting into a room and no one's listening. And if you'll notice, I'm like really rarely active on social media unless it's for business purposes. Like, that is the only reason I really use social media. I mean, I posted about our, anniversary. Maybe I'll share a story with my daughter or something like that. But other than that, I'm not really on social media. And I wasn't really before starting my business 7 years ago. And so, but it's such a valuable tool for business. But anyways, where that question came from is I was frankly starting to feel that way. And I'm running this group on mental health. And I was like, this is not helping mine. I feel like I'm posting and it just like when I look back a few years ago at the engagement that the group was getting and people were signing on all the time during the lives and comment and blah, all this stuff. It was like great energy. And then I was looking back more recently and I was like, it's just not the same. Like, again, it was that feeling that I'm just shouting into a room and no one's listening. And so I was really questioning, it's like, do I want to keep this going or not? Is this actually serving anybody? Is it serving me? And the problem is I love it. Like, I love the group. I love going live. I really love doing it when I know that people are actually listening to it and like reading what I'm putting out there. So we got almost 50 comments on that post of people sharing that they do watch the lives. They watch it in their spare time or when they're making dinner. They send it to friends. They want the group to stay. It's bringing them value. And that it really lit me up. And like I said, I don't really engage on social media. So I don't that the intention of the post was to not put pressure on people where I'm like, I need you to engage. That's not what I'm trying to say. But just that one post was enough for me to be like, okay, people are listening, right? So thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to stay at it. I'm going to keep with it. I'm coming back on Mondays. My schedule allows for that now, which is awesome too. And I'm going to start also incorporating more case study reviews. I want this to be relevant, right? My goal for people listening to my lives is to see yourself in what I'm talking about for whatever topic, if it's hormones, if it's histamine, if it's autoimmune, if it's gut health, whatever it might be. I want the information to resonate so deeply that you're like, oh my gosh, I finally feel heard. I feel validated. I have questions that I can bring to my doctor. I have hope that this is fixable, that I might feel better, and see a path that you can take with that, if that's with me, if that's with your current practitioner, if that's with your doctor, if it's on your own. And it occurred to me that telling stories of the dozens, hundreds of clients that I've worked with, their success stories and how awful they were feeling before and how great they're feeling afterwards. And more importantly, what we did to get them there and what was causing those issues is probably going to be a lot more relatable. So I'm going to start sharing more stories like that. And we kick that off today. So again, thank you for everyone who is in my Facebook group. If you're watching this video on YouTube or somewhere else and you're not in my Facebook group, you should join. We would love to have you. There's almost 4,000 of us in that group. It's called Holistic Solutions for Mental Health and Wellness. And I would love for you to join. Thank you again for everybody that is in the group and that commented on that post and for all of your warm thoughts and messages. It was heard, and I'm glad to still be here. So with that said, for those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Kimsey Berkwin. I'm an integrative nutritionist in my online nutrition and wellness practice called Progressive Health and Wellness, where I work with people who are really struggling with their health. Ambitious, busy men and women who are struggling with anxiety, fatigue, digestive issues, sleep, stress. They can't lose weight. Their hormones are out of whack. They feel like crap and they don't know why, basically. And we take a root caused body mind approach to optimize their mental and physical health. So today I'm going to share Allie's story. Allie's story really encompasses how hormone imbalance can wreak havoc on how we feel physically and emotionally and mentally. And she really exudes estrogen dominance, this concept of estrogen dominance. So I'm going to weave in some of that information too. What is estrogen dominance? What does estrogen and progesterone do in the body, et cetera? But first, let me lay the scene, right? Set the scene. So Allie and I have actually at this point been working together for 6 years. We met in 2018. When I say 6 years, we worked very closely together for about a year and a half. And over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been intermittent. She's been on a maintenance plan. We meet every quarter or so. We just check in. She has questions, flare ups happen. She gets sugar cravings. What do I do? That kind of thing. But she's good. She's good to go at this point. But I just love meeting with her because I've seen her get married and I've seen her go through all these life changes and big trips that she's anyways. So where I'm going with that is when Allie first came in, she's 26 years old. And she came in primarily because she was having a hard time losing weight. Her face kept breaking out, but especially around the menstrual cycle. And she was okay with her energy, but it could be a little bit better. She thought she should be getting more out of her workouts. Like the amount that she was working out, she wasn't firming up or toning up or losing weight. And then especially around she had a pretty intense sugar cravings. And then especially around her menstrual cycle, she would get PMS and irritability and depression and mood swings. And she would have more water retention. She'd gain weight around the cycle and she'd almost anticipate that happening. So water retention and bloating. Her breasts would swell and they were tender. She had cramping, would have to lay on the couch with a heating pad for a couple hours. And it was just getting to where, for at least a week out of the month, she was just out. It was really knocking her out. So we started off by running blood labs. We found that she was insulin resistant. So I want to say fasting insulin around 3, 4, or 5, between 3 and 5. She was at I think it was 16. So she had high insulin levels. That was driving the sugar cravings. That was making it really difficult for her to lose weight. And that was also affecting her menstrual cycle. So high insulin in women will increase ovarian production of testosterone. This is where the PCOS connection comes from. Now, PCOS is different. That is a diagnosable condition. It's a lifelong condition, but you can get to where it's so balanced, your hormones are so balanced that it doesn't manifest. But there's a genetic component to PCOS. But nonetheless, in women, period, insulin resistance will increase ovarian production of testosterone. So and then that testosterone can be converted into estrogen through an enzyme called aromatase. So keep that in mind. So we also found high iron, which will also connect to the estrogen piece. So we implement an anti-inflammatory therapeutic diet. We start doing intermittent fasting with her. We really emphasized protein, so eating at least 100 grams of protein. Strength training. She was doing more cardio, like running style of exercise. So we brought in strength training because muscle mass is like one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body. So more muscle equals more insulin resistance. And especially in women doing intermittent fasting, strength training and protein will preserve your muscle so you don't lose muscle while doing intermittent fasting. So we also had her go gluten-free, cut out gluten, dairy, soy, corn, and sugar, like significantly reduce her sugar. And within a month, so she struggled with the sugar cravings. We came up with alternatives like avocado mousse and chia seed pudding. And with balancing out her blood sugar and the insulin levels, though, that really started to take a backseat. And she didn't have to rely on willpower. You really shouldn't have to rely on willpower except for like the first few days. That's where the alternatives come in. Anyways, then the sugar cravings went down. So she started to lose weight. She started to have more like balanced energy during the day instead of having these like big peaks and that like she'd hit a wall at like 2 to 3 in the afternoon. She was, what was the other big thing that we noted? Dairy caused her to break out. So she ate a lot of sugar or ate dairy that caused her to break out. And within 30 days, she'd lost like 7 pounds. And like I said, her energy was more consistent. Her sleep was much better because she wasn't having these blood sugar crashes at night. Because when that happens, your body releases adrenaline because you have to have blood sugar at night and cortisol. So she was sleeping more soundly. Her skin was clearing up. She lost 7 pounds. And her menstrual cycle improved. So the symptoms were less severe, but they were still present. So she still gained a little bit of weight, kind of felt puffy in general. Her cramping, she could go out and do stuff. She wasn't like couch bound, but she still felt it. It was kind of like, yeah, I'd rather not be at work, but I can be kind of thing. She had PMS still, but not to the point where she was like, I'm afraid I'm going to like ruin relationships. It was more like kind of like general irritability, pissed off at the person that cut you off, annoyed at whatever. So it improved by about 50%. I'll put it that way. So at this point is when we ran a hormone test. Now, the timing of testing hormones and the way that they're tested is very important. Here's why. Hormones are very responsive to our internal and external environment. So even if we test hormones right off the bat and found imbalances, we're still going to need to improve someone's diet, their blood sugar, possibly their gut health. Allie didn't really have a lot of digestive symptoms and her stool test was pretty clear. We did a little bit of cleanup, but nothing, we didn't use antimicrobials or anything like that. It was pretty basic, fibers, things like that. But for a lot of people, we'll need to clean up the gut. Those things and stress management, those things are foundations that need to be laid. And by laying that foundation, oftentimes hormones clean up on their own. But if they don't, we at least now have a clearer picture of what their true baseline is going to look like. So like I said, even if we ran hormones up front and found overt imbalances, I am not going to target hormones until those things are in place. So that's why timing matters. And that's why we always run hormones at usually about the like 3 to 4 month mark so that we can lay that foundation. The second thing is the type of test matters. So there's 3 types of tests that are used to test hormones. There's blood, urine, and saliva. Blood work, this is 90% of the time what you're going to get from your medical doctor. So your OBGYN, your medical doctor, they're going to test hormones in blood. It's not bad per se. The only thing with blood hormones is it's showing what's available in the blood at the time of the blood draw. It's not showing the tissue levels of the hormones, which is where the work is done, like where hormones do their work. There can be a discrepancy. It can be low in the blood, high in the tissue. It can be high in the blood, low in the tissue. So there can be a discrepancy there. For people that are on hormone replacement therapy, blood will probably be the best to track those changes because it's going to be the most consistent. So there's blood. Blood, you're also not able to get any kind of it's just a spot shot. You can't get a diurnal rhythm. So, like what your hormones are doing over the course of the day. And this is particularly important for cortisol, if you're testing cortisol or melatonin, but especially if you're testing cortisol, because the rhythm that cortisol is going through is perhaps more important, or I'll say equally as important as just the total 24-hour exposure that your tissues have to cortisol. So salivary or urinary will give you that data. You're looking at the diurnal trend of all of the hormones, but particularly cortisol. And then salivary will show you what is in the tissue doing work. So that's really valuable. Urinary, the Dutch test, dried urine test, comprehensive hormones. The Dutch test is the best urinary test for hormones. That will show you metabolites, hormonal metabolites, that you can then deduce what the tissue levels would be. The value of the Dutch test is you can also see pathways, like biochemical pathways that these hormones might be going through, which is very valuable. So especially for estrogen, we can see which pathways your estrogen is being detoxified through. Some are better than others. We can glean methylation status. We can look at oxidative stress. We can see not only patterns in cortisol, but the 24-hour exposure to cortisol. You can see your tissue metabolism of cortisol to cortisone. In descending order, ascending, you get the most information. So blood is the least, then there's saliva, then there's Dutch. It depends. So if it's like your average PMS, menopause, kind of imbalance symptom presentation, I will generally run a salivary test because I like to see the tissue levels is really what I'm looking for. If there's a diagnosable condition to go along with the imbalance, so PCOS, endometriosis, breast cancer, then I run the Dutch test if I want to see like really specific, expansive information. So with Allie's situation, we ran salivary and her patterns came up classic as expected. So what her cortisol levels look overall okay. They were fine during the day. They came up a little bit at night. She didn't have that great of a bedtime routine. So she's watching TV, she's scrolling on her phone, she's going to bed late. She's sometimes working late, like kind of made sense. So we talked about bedtime routine and evening routine as a whole. Go for a walk at dusk because the red light will help the production of melatonin. Go for a walk first thing in the morning because that red light will also, and the emerging blue light will also help set their circadian rhythm. Dim the lights if possible at night. Wear blue light blocking glasses. No computer time, no work time past like ideally 7 o'clock. One screen at a time. So if you're watching TV, don't scroll on your phone. If you're on your phone, don't watch TV. And then ideally before bed, like half an hour before bed, no screens at all, and just read or meditate or breath work or something like that. Okay, so we work on that. So that brings us to the root of it, which is the estrogen progesterone imbalance. So the reason I say it's classic, let's talk about what estrogen progesterone what that looks like and what these hormones do in the body. So estrogen, I describe it as being a very active and proliferative hormone. So for example, what I mean by active is in the brain, estrogen will increase like dopamine, norepinephrine levels. So it has more of a like get up and go kind of activity to it, if you will. Actually, I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but that's why some women feel more extroverted, more driven, more kind of expansive, if you will, in the first half of the menstrual cycle when estrogen levels are climbing. What I mean by proliferative is estrogen makes things grow. So it will make fat cells grow, it can make cysts grow, it can make tissue grow, like tumors, for example. So makes things grow, active proliferative, right? Progesterone, on the other hand, is calming, soothing, and anxiolytic. It helps with sleep, it helps with mood, causes women to want to go kind of inward. It nourishes the uterine lining to get the body ready for pregnancy should the egg be fertilized. So it balances, you often hear progesterone balances the activities of estrogen. In the first half of the menstrual cycle, the primary focus of what's happening is there's an egg maturing, the follicle that's maturing in the ovary. So from day one of the period through the next like roughly 14 days, we'll say 11 to 15 days, estrogen levels are steadily climbing. Once they peak, there's a surge. That surge causes a luteinizing hormone surge that causes the release of the egg. Ovulation occurs, lasts about, call it 3 days or so. Ovulation happens on one day, but the time frame can go 3-4 days or so. Then estrogen levels start coming down. Egg travels down the uterus, or travels down the fallopian tubes, implants in the uterus, and now the ovaries start releasing progesterone. So progesterone, estrogen levels stay lower, progesterone levels start climbing over the next roughly 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle, getting that uterine lining ready for implantation should it happen. If there's no egg implantation, then estrogen and progesterone both fall, and that is what triggers the menstrual cycle. That's in a normal situation. So let's talk about what happens when there's what's called estrogen dominance, which is what was happening in Allie's case. So estrogen dominance it's not a diagnosable condition. It is, I wouldn't even call it a syndrome. I guess you could say it's a condition. It's not a disease. It's not a diagnosis. It's a, condition works. Like it's a phenomenon. But really what happens is it occurs when there's an imbalance in estrogen and progesterone. So that can be either high estrogen to normal progesterone, normal estrogen to low progesterone, or a combination of both, where there's high estrogen and low progesterone. And we test hormones in women, salivary or urinary, on days 19 through 21 of the menstrual cycle, when estrogen should be at the specific range and progesterone should be starting to climb. And so the activities of progesterone don't balance the activities of estrogen. So that can lead into these symptoms that I was describing, which is why Allie is kind of a classic case. The water retention, the bloating, the irritability, the depression, the heavier menstrual cycles, clotty periods, acne, they can be changes and disruptions in sleep, changes in bowel patterns even. Some women become more constipated or have loose stool. Some women will even have like liver gallbladder symptoms because estrogen thickens bile. So it can affect the liver gallbladder pathway. If there's low progesterone with it, that's where we'll see a lot more of the like anxiety presentation, painful cramping, insomnia. Those are some of the big low progesterone symptoms. Anxiety, irritability, cramping, sometimes insomnia. So if there's both going on, women can experience both. So what causes it and what do you do about it? So I'm going to talk about what the contributions to high estrogen, and I'll talk about the contributions to low progesterone. So high estrogen, one of the biggest things that we're looking at is the liver is not clearing estrogen. The liver and bowels are not adequately clearing estrogen. That's one of the biggest problems. Now, what can cause that? So birth control, obviously, if you're taking in estrogen or hormone replacement therapy, if you're taking it in, that can contribute to it. Xenoestrogens, so chemicals in our environment that mimic estrogen, like in plastics and tap water and let's see what else, makeups and personal care products that have parabens or phthalates. Um, if you're especially heating food in plastic, Teflon, like everyday personal care products, cleaning products, cookware products, all of those things can contain xenoestrogens that cause our body to upregulate estradiol production, estrogen production, but also interfere with the liver detox pathways to metabolize estrogen. So if you're taking estrogen in other words, knowingly, like birth control or hormone replacement therapy, or unknowingly through xenoestrogens in our environment, that's one way. Second, there can be nutrient deficiencies. So B vitamins, protein deficiencies, magnesium deficiency, um, copper excess actually can cause an increase in estrogen. So nutrient imbalances, I'll say, can also contribute to that. If there is blood sugar dysregulation, so higher blood sugar will cause fatty liver, that can connect to it. And then the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome can cause us to recirculate our estrogen, reabsorb it. It will also, like SIBO, can negatively affect the gallbladder, inflame the gallbladder. That can affect the liver's detoxification of estrogen. There's constipation. We're more prone to reabsorbing our estrogen. So poor gut health, in other words. And then a lack of vegetables, because cruciferous vegetables, sulfur containing vegetables like eggs and garlic and onion all have nutrients, sulforaphane, indole 3-carbinol, that help us metabolize estrogen. So if we're not eating those, that can also, and we're especially for eating junk food, that can also lead to higher estrogen levels. So those are some ways that high estrogen can occur. I talked about the symptoms associated with that. Next is low progesterone. The biggest two reasons of low progesterone in women are stress and inflammation. Basically, if the body doesn't feel safe, it's not a good time to get pregnant, right? So if it's on fire, if it's fighting an infection, if it's toxic, if it's running from a lion all day long, it's probably not a great time to get pregnant, right? So it down regulates production of progesterone to prevent that. Now, women struggling with infertility, please listen to this, because low progesterone is a big reason of struggling to get, but especially struggling to maintain a pregnancy. Because without progesterone, that uterine lining cannot thicken in order for the egg to implant. So if it does implant, it's not going to stay, or it's just not going to implant to be fertilized. So that's a big problem. And stress and inflammation and metabolic health is huge for this, because if your body has inconsistent levels of fuel at any given time, it's like if you're trying to drive a car across country and your fuel tank is just going from empty to full, empty to full, empty to full, unpredictably, right? You have no idea when it might suddenly drop to empty. You're probably not going to keep going on that road trip, right? If you keep stalling out of gas on the side of the road, like, you're going to fill up the tank and go to a hotel and like call it good. And that's what the body does, right? The body has unpredictable levels of glucose. And this is characterized by high hemoglobin A1C, if it's above 5.3, frankly, in my books. High insulin, again, if it's above 3 or 5, like between 3 to 5. If you have high LDL cholesterol, high triglycerides, like those are signs of that. And that is so, so common to see. I read some statistic that like 50% of adults in the US are pre-diabetic, which is like shocking. So anyways, where I'm going with that, back to low progesterone, stress and inflammation. What are sources of stress and inflammation? There's emotional stress, job stress, relationship stress, financial stress. Yeah, right. Lacking meaning and purpose in life, feeling lonely. Those are emotional stressors. trauma as a child, divorce, death of a loved one. There's emotional stressors, there's physical stressors. So metabolic dysregulation, right? Blood sugar swings. If you're listening to this and if you go longer than a few hours without eating and you become ravenously hungry, like I need to eat now, hangry, irritable, tired, shaky, craving carbs, craving sugar, I'm speaking to you. This means you have blood sugar dysregulation. This is what I'm talking about. If you crave sweets a lot, if you especially crave sweets after meals, if you get tired after eating a high carb meal, or if like pasta, right, or sandwiches, or if you get energy after eating carbs, either one of those situations you don't want. All of those things can be signs of blood sugar dysregulation. And I'm really harping on that because it's a really big one and it's so easy to fix, relatively speaking. So physical stressors, blood sugar dysregulation, nutrient imbalances, microbiome imbalances, infections, toxic exposure, things along those lines. And there could be injuries, physical injuries, surgery, things like that. So those cause low progesterone. But just remember, if the body doesn't feel safe because it's stressed and inflamed, progesterone will stay low. So what do we do about it? So testing first to really know, because the symptoms can overlap. So a woman might have a lot of those symptoms, but her estrogen levels are normal and progesterone's low, or her estrogen's high and progesterone looks fine. But the approach would be different for those. So generally speaking, if we're wanting to help with estrogen metabolism, increasing the cruciferous vegetables that we eat. So broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, kale, onion, garlic, eggs, all of those help with estrogen metabolism. Broccoli sprouts are especially great. Healthy fats will help with that too. And then B vitamin rich foods. So animal protein and B vitamin rich foods. All of those are great. Detox your environment. Try to get non-toxic personal care products. I love the brand Mineral Fusion is great. You can get them on Amazon. Non-toxic cleaning products. There's a brand called Shaklee, Shacklee, that is wonderful. They've got great, and makeup also. Let's see what else. Water purification. I like Aquasana or Berkey, Berkey. So clean up your environment, in other words. And then supplementally, you can supplement with indole 3-carbinol or calcium D-glucarate are my go-tos to support that. I love doing global liver support, glycine, milk thistle, things like that. But for estrogen, indole 3-carbinol and calcium D-glucarate are particularly potent. And then for supporting progesterone, like you got to deal with your stress. You got to deal with your stress. If you're stressed at work, if you hate your job, if you're stressed in your relationship, like this is where we start having conversations around like you can either change the situation or you can change yourself. So I'm not telling anyone to quit their job or leave their relationship, but I'm asking you to have a heart-to-heart about how much those things might be impacting you, or like, the financial situation or whatever it might be. But the stress has to be like focused on and truly dealt with. So what do I mean by dealt with? That might be seeing a therapist. It might be seeing a hypnotherapist. It might be trying nervous system regulation techniques. So like the Gupta program or DNRS, dynamic neural retraining system. Both of those are phenomenal for helping to learn to regulate the limbic system and the nervous system. Having a daily breath work, like dedicated breath work practice. I'd spend 10 to 20 minutes per day doing this with my HRV, heart rate variability biofeedback device. There's many different forms. But like teaching your body, I'm going to be direct in saying you can't supplement your way out of stress. There are adaptogens that we can use. Absolutely. I love ashwagandha. I love rhodiola. I love mushroom extracts. I love lemon balm, like all those things. But you can't supplement your way out of stress. You have to look at the environment. You have to look at the stressors. You have to do the work, and you have to retrain your nervous system. So those are the ways to do that. And then also is blood sugar balance. That is like my big thing. Blood sugar balance. This has so many impacts on your health, from hormones to inflammation to all the things. But truly, so ways that I like to support this, I'm personally a big fan of intermittent fasting for women, men, I don't care. It just needs to be done right. So I'm an advocate for fasting for about 16 hours overnight. Slowly work up to that if needed. Make sure you're eating enough protein, 1 gram at least per pound of ideal body weight, and strength training, because that will preserve your muscle. I'm not going to go into like how that can go wrong, but it is very important to do. Eat enough protein, practice strength training. I often recommend something called time-limited carbs. So that's where you eat your concentrated carbs at 1 meal per day. So like starchy vegetables like potatoes, for example, grains or fruit, and 1 meal per day. And the other 2 meals are lower carb. So for example, breakfast could be like eggs scrambled with arugula and bell pepper and avocado. And lunch is like a big salad with some sweet potato and quinoa and legumes like lentils and some chicken and maybe some like strawberries cut up on top. And then dinner is steak and asparagus. Right, that's an example, but that'll keep insulin levels low, especially with that intermittent fasting for like 90% of the day, which is the goal. And walk after meals. Go for like a 10-minute walk around the block after meals. That'll drop your glucose levels by like 20 points just doing that. So, yeah, and then supplementally, we can support progesterone. So we can still use things like lemon balm and ashwagandha for the stress support. And then chasteberry, Vitex and chasteberry helps your brain signal the ovaries to produce progesterone. All right. I think that covers it. So in Allie's case, once we've really figured out where her hormones had landed, we see this high estrogen, low progesterone thing. We do support her. We used a DIM calcium D-glucarate combo, and we also used the chasteberry, and we were doing a lot of the stuff for the progesterone piece as well. She cleaned up her environment. We incorporated breath work, and she was already working with a therapist, and we blood sugar balance, I already talked about, was a big part of her. We lowered her insulin down to like 5, which is awesome. And she noticed, she actually came in to see me earlier this year and commented. She was like, she was having a flare up of her symptoms, of her menstrual symptoms. And we focused really on the blood sugar and the sugar intake and supporting just like kind of nutrient density and detoxification as a whole. And I saw her 4 months later and she was like, that was it. It was just the sugar. And that getting back on track with that significantly helped. So, all right. I hope that helps. Again, not only if you're struggling with like menstrual symptoms, but this goes for menopause, and especially if you're trying to get pregnant. So I hope that helped. I'll send out, there will be a blog posted tomorrow, so you've got it all in writing. And if any other, anyways, yeah, if you are wanting to know if we can get results like this for you, like what we did for Allie, we do offer free 15-minute consultations. Just a quick phone call, talk more about the health challenges that you're having and what you're looking for. And if we both feel like it's a good fit, then we'll talk about how to get started and what next steps look like. So I'll drop that link in this post so you can schedule that. All right. Thanks to everyone for being here. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.